Unaware his wife owned the jet, he left her on the tarmac and flew his mistress to Paris. What would you do if your spouse left you behind to travel with someone else? This is where everything began. The jet door began to close while Nia Carter Holloway was still standing on the tarmac, and her husband did not even look back. Cold rain swept across the private terminal outside New York, flattening the hem of Nia's charcoal coat against her legs as the Gulfstream's engines deepened into a low, expensive roar. A ground attendant held an umbrella over her, but the wind pushed silver drops beneath it, cooling her face and darkening the leather folder in her hand. 30 feet away, Ethan Holloway stood inside the aircraft doorway in a tailored navy overcoat, one hand resting against the polished frame as though the jet belonged to him. Behind him, Sienna Blake appeared in the cabin light wearing a cream cashmere suit and the diamond earrings Nia had once chosen for a charity auction in Geneva. "Ethan," Nia called, not loudly, but clearly enough to carry across the rain. He glanced toward her with the impatience of a man delayed by something he had already decided no longer mattered. "The passenger list changed," he said. "This is a private business trip now." Nia looked past him into the cabin. Her overnight case had been removed from the storage compartment and placed beside the terminal stairs. Through the oval window, she could see Sienna lowering herself into the wide leather seat embroidered with Nia's initials, NCH, in discreet silver thread. A glass of champagne waited on the walnut table beside her. "You changed the passenger list without telling me," Nia said. Ethan stepped down one stair, keeping his voice low. "We were going to discuss this after Paris." "Discuss what?" Sienna appeared behind him and folded her arms. "Maybe this is not the place for a marriage conversation." Her tone carried the soft confidence of someone who believed the outcome had already been settled. Nia watched her touch Ethan's shoulder, not accidentally, not professionally. Ethan did not move away. "The gala matters to the Holloway group," he said. "Sienna is leading the Paris presentation. You would only complicate things." Nia's gaze shifted to the aircraft registration painted near the tail, Civ 900, beneath a narrow gold stripe. "Complicate your business trip," she repeated. "Do not make this dramatic," Ethan said. "Take the car home. My office will arrange something for you this weekend." The ground attendant lowered her eyes. Two members of the flight crew remained near the stairs, their expressions carefully neutral. They knew Nia. They had greeted her by name on dozens of flights, but today Ethan had instructed them to treat her as an unauthorized passenger. Sienna looked through the rain at Nia's coat, her luggage, and the wet pavement around her heels. "Paris is easier with people who understand the moment," she said. "Some people know when they are no longer needed." Nia felt the words settle without entering her. There had been months of late dinners, locked phones, and business weekends that returned Ethan smelling faintly of a perfume she did not wear. But Betrayal looked different when it was framed inside the doorway of an aircraft she had purchased through her family trust 6 years earlier. Ethan raised one hand toward the crew. "Close the door." The stairs began retracting. Nia did not argue. She did not reach for him. She only watched as Ethan turned away and Sienna took the seat designed for the owner of the jet. The door sealed. The engines rose. The aircraft began moving toward the runway, carrying two people who believed they had left Nia powerless in the rain. She handed the attendant her suitcase, stepped beneath the terminal awning, and removed her phone. "Call Carter Aviation Operations," she said. The attendant looked up, startled. Nia's voice remained calm. "Ask them to confirm the registered owner of aircraft Civ 900. Less than a minute later, the operations director answered personally. "Dr. Carter, the jet is owned entirely by Carter Aviation Holdings, under your controlling trust." Nia watched the aircraft pause near the runway lights. "And Ethan's authority?" "Spousal guest privileges only. Revocable at your discretion." Nia closed her eyes for one steady breath. Then she opened them and looked toward the jet preparing to leave for Paris. "Suspend his access after takeoff," she said. "And send me the complete flight authorization. I want to know who removed the owner from her own passenger list." The seat beneath Sienna Blake was embroidered with Nia's initials, but she settled into it, as if replacing the owner required nothing more than closing the cabin door. 10 minutes after takeoff, the Gulfstream climbed above the storm clouds, leaving the rain-darkened runway far below. Inside the cabin, warm amber lights reflected across walnut panels and polished brass. Sienna lifted her champagne glass and stretched one hand along the cream leather armrest marked NCH in silver thread. Across from her, Ethan loosened his tie and opened a presentation folder labeled Paris Aviation Summit. "You should have seen her face," Sienna said, standing there with her suitcase while the stares disappeared. Ethan looked toward the window. "Nia always needs time to accept change." "You mean she expects everyone to wait until she approves it? She will calm down." Sienna smiled faintly. "You left your wife on a runway and took me to Paris." "I do not think calm is the word." In the forward galley, Captain Daniel Mercer received a secure message from Carter Aviation Operations. Spousal guest privileges for Ethan Holloway had been suspended effective immediately after the aircraft reached safe cruising altitude. The jet remained authorized to continue only until operations reviewed the altered passenger manifest. Daniel read the notice twice. He had flown Nia for 6 years. She knew every crew member's name, remembered birthdays, and once delayed a departure so a flight attendant could attend her daughter's school ceremony. Ethan, by contrast, referred to the aircraft as "my jet" during interviews and assumed the staff belonged to him. Daniel entered the cabin with the measured composure of a pilot carrying information that could not be softened. "Mr. Holloway, operations has requested confirmation regarding today's passenger list." Ethan did not look up. "My office already handled it." Dr. Carter Holloway was removed 37 minutes before departure. Sienna placed her glass down. "She was not joining us. The registered owner was listed as denied boarding," Daniel said. Ethan's expression sharpened. "Nia is my wife. I have authority to revise household travel. Your access is categorized as spousal guest use. The owner's authorization supersedes it." The word owner seemed to disturb the air. Sienna looked from Daniel to Ethan. "Owner." Ethan closed the presentation folder. "Carter Aviation manages the aircraft. It is a family structure." Daniel's face remained neutral. "The aircraft is registered to Carter Aviation Holdings under Dr. Carter Holloway's controlling trust." Sienna stared down at the silver initials beneath her hand. "You told me this jet belonged to Holloway Global. The companies share resources." "That is not what he said," Daniel replied. Ethan stood. "Captain, return to the cockpit. Operations also requires the source of the manifest change." Sienna's posture stiffened. Ethan glanced at her. "My assistant submitted it." Daniel held out a tablet displaying the authorization trail. The change had come from Sienna's executive account, approved through Ethan's personal travel code. Nia's name had been deleted, her status changed to unauthorized, and Sienna had assigned herself the owner's seat, suite, and arrival credentials. "This is administrative," Ethan said. "Then operations will document it as administrative," Daniel replied before leaving. Back at the private terminal, Nia sat inside a quiet conference room with her coat drying over a chair. On the screen before her, the complete flight file showed every alteration. Sienna had not merely replaced her on the passenger list. She had also changed the Paris arrival documents so that French ground staff would welcome Ethan and Sienna as owners of Carter Aviation's flagship aircraft. The presentation folder uploaded to the jet's network contained something larger, a draft agreement transferring 3 aircraft, 2 European hangar contracts, and Carter Aviation's Paris operating rights into a new company called Holloway Blake Air. Nia read the signature page. Her name appeared beneath it, copied from an old maintenance authorization. She called operations again. "Do not alert them yet," she said. "Let them believe Paris is still waiting." Then she opened the ownership registry and found the clause Ethan had never read. Any attempt to transfer Carter Aviation assets without the controlling owner's consent triggered immediate recall of the aircraft and suspension of every passenger responsible. The cruelest part was not that Ethan left Nia on the tarmac. It was that he used her own aircraft's communication system to announce that she no longer belonged in his life. At cruising altitude above the Atlantic, the cabin settled into the quiet rhythm of long-distance flight. Sienna reclined in Nia's embroidered seat while a flight attendant arranged dinner service on the walnut table. Ethan stood near the forward bulkhead, speaking through the crew intercom after Captain Daniel Mercer requested a formal explanation for the altered manifest. He believed the message would remain inside the aircraft. He did not know Carter Aviation automatically recorded every operational communication involving denied boarding, security changes, or ownership disputes. For the record, Ethan said, his voice carrying through the cabin speakers. Nia Carter Holloway is no longer connected to this trip or to my personal decisions. Ms. Blake is traveling as my authorized companion and business representative. The crew will follow my instructions until we reach Paris. In the terminal conference room, Nia heard every word through the secure operations feed. Rain traced thin lines down the windows behind her. She remained seated, one hand resting beside the ownership registry, while the man she had married 12 years earlier erased her from a journey taking place inside property registered solely to her trust. The operations director, Malcolm Reed, lowered the volume. Dr. Carter, we can issue the recall now. Nia looked at the aircraft's position on the tracking screen. It had crossed the Canadian coastline and was climbing toward its approved transatlantic route. Not yet, she said. I want the complete record. Malcolm opened the passenger communications log. Sienna had submitted instructions to Paris Ground Services, identifying herself as co-owner of Holloway Blake Heir. She had requested a red carpet arrival, private customs processing, and press access beside the jet. She had also ordered the removal of every visible Carter Aviation emblem before the Paris Aviation Summit. Can she authorize branding changes? Nia asked. No. No one can without your written approval. And Ethan? He has guest use privileges only. Those privileges do not include operational command, asset transfer, or public representation of ownership. Nia listened as another intercom recording arrived from the cabin. Sienna's voice was lighter than Ethan's, but sharper. Please remove the monogrammed pillows before we land. The NCH initials will confuse photographers. A flight attendant responded carefully. Those items are part of the registered owner's cabin specifications. Then place them in storage, Sienna said. Mrs. Holloway will not be traveling with us again. The title passed through the speaker like something stolen and badly fitted. Nia did not flinch. She opened the Paris Summit program and found Ethan scheduled to announce a European expansion using Carter Aviation's hangars, aircraft, and operating certificates. Sienna was listed as chief brand officer of the new company. Neither had legal authority to make the announcement, yet they planned to use the sight of the jet behind them as proof that the transfer had already happened. They are relying on appearance, Nia said. Malcolm nodded. Once they arrive, journalists will assume the aircraft belongs to Holloway Global. Then they cannot arrive in it. She requested the nearest Carter Aviation-controlled facility capable of receiving the Gulf Stream without disrupting safety or international regulations. Malcolm identified a private airport in Bangor, Maine, where the company maintained a secure hangar and customs support. The aircraft could be redirected there during its scheduled operational review before entering oceanic airspace. Nia studied the route, then called Daniel directly through the encrypted cockpit channel. Captain Mercer, this is the registered owner. Dr. Carter, I am listening. Continue normal operations until you receive written recall authority. Do not discuss the asset transfer documents with the passengers. Understood. And Daniel? Yes, ma'am. Nia looked at Ethan's recorded statement on the screen. Preserve every communication. She ended the call and signed the recall order electronically. Before transmitting it, she opened one final document attached to the Paris Agreement. Ethan had promised a French investor exclusive use of the jet as collateral for the new company. The closing was scheduled 1 hour after landing. Nia pressed send. On the tracking screen, aircraft V900 received immediate instructions to leave the Paris route and turn toward the private airport where its true owner's authority could no longer be ignored. The jet had already turned away from Paris when Ethan raised his champagne glass, unaware that the woman he abandoned had just reclaimed the sky beneath him. Inside the Gulf Stream, the change in direction was subtle at first. The cabin lights remained warm, the engine toned steady, and the Atlantic disappeared beneath a blanket of cloud. Sienna leaned back in Nia's embroidered seat, scrolling through photographs from the gala they planned to attend in Paris. She had already chosen which image would appear first. Her hand on Ethan's arm beside the aircraft stairs, the gold stripe of V900 visible behind them, and the caption announcing a new era for Holloway Global. Ethan reviewed the French investment agreement across from her, making handwritten changes to a clause that promised the jet as collateral for Holloway Blake Heir. Neither of them noticed Captain Daniel Mercer leave the cockpit until he stood at the edge of the cabin. Mr. Holloway, Ms. Blake, we have received an operational recall, he said. Ethan looked up. From whom? Carter Aviation Control. Sienna's smile disappeared. We are already airborne. The aircraft has been redirected to Bangor for a mandatory ownership and authorization review. Ethan closed the folder. We are scheduled for Paris. That schedule is no longer active. I did not approve a route change. Daniel's expression remained calm. You are not the registered owner. The words settled harder. This time, Ethan stood and moved toward the cockpit. I am instructing you to continue to Paris. Daniel did not step aside. Your guest privileges were suspended after departure. I cannot accept operational instructions from you. Sienna looked toward Ethan. Call Nia. I will handle it. He dialed once, then again. Nia watched his name appear on her phone from inside Carter Aviation's operations center, where a wall of screens tracked aircraft, weather systems, and international flight clearances. She let the call ring until it stopped. Malcolm Reed stood beside her with the ownership registry open on a secure monitor. The aircraft is 28 minutes from Bangor, he said. French airspace clearance has been withdrawn, and the Paris handling company has been notified that Holloway Global has no authority over the jet. Nia looked at the route line curving back toward Maine. What about the summit? They still expect Ethan and Sienna. Do not cancel their invitations. Malcolm glanced at her. You want them to attend? I want them to discover who owns Carter Aviation in the room where they plan to announce they did. She opened the Paris conference schedule. The summit's closing gala would take place the following evening at a private aviation museum near Le Bourget. Ethan was listed as keynote speaker. Sienna was scheduled to unveil Holloway Blake Heir before hundreds of investors, manufacturers, and journalists. Nia's name appeared nowhere, even though Carter Aviation had funded the event's safety initiative for 5 consecutive years. Prepare aircraft CV-101, she said. Full crew, direct clearance to Paris, departure in 90 minutes. Malcolm nodded. Your flagship jet. The one they do not know exists. CV-101 was newer, larger, and never connected publicly to the Holloway name. Nia had used it for medical transport partnerships, emergency diplomacy, and private negotiations she preferred to keep beyond tabloid attention. Ethan had seen it only once from a distance and assumed it belonged to a client. On CAV-900, his third call finally reached voicemail. Nia, this has gone far enough, he said. Restore the Paris route. You are interfering with a major transaction. Sienna stood near him, listening. Tell her the summit will hold her responsible if the deal collapses. Ethan lowered his voice. The jet is part of Holloway Global's business infrastructure. In the operations center, the recording arrived seconds later. Nia listened without expression, then asked Malcolm to add it to the authorization file. He still thinks access means ownership, she said. Tomorrow, let the registry explain the difference. The Gulfstream landed in Bangor just after midnight. Carter Aviation staff met it beside a private hangar and informed Ethan that the aircraft would remain grounded pending an asset transfer investigation. His luggage and Sienna's were unloaded onto the wet pavement. There was no limousine, no hotel suite, and no onward flight arranged under Carter Aviation. As Sienna stared at the jet being towed behind secured hangar doors, Nia boarded CV-101 in New York. Before takeoff, Malcolm handed her the final report from Paris. Ethan and Sienna's planned announcement included a video presenting CAV-900 as the first aircraft in their new fleet. Nia signed one instruction beneath it. Replace the video with the official ownership record and introduce Dr. Nia Carter Holloway as founder and sole controlling owner before Ethan reaches the stage. The first luxury Ethan lost was not the jet. It was the certainty that Paris would still welcome him after Nia took her name, her aircraft, and her money out from under his plans. The private terminal in Bangor was nearly empty when Ethan and Sienna entered beneath fluorescent lights with their luggage rolling behind them. Rain tapped against the windows, and the quiet felt harsher than the storm they had left in New York. There was no chauffeur waiting, no diplomatic greeter, and no Carter Aviation representative offering apologies. A desk agent informed them that their hotel, onward charter, and Paris car service had all been canceled because each reservation had been issued through Carter Aviation's corporate travel account. Restore them, Ethan said, placing his black card on the counter. The agent ran it twice, then returned it politely. The authorization limit will not cover the charter and international handling fees. Sienna stared at him. You said we could arrange another aircraft. We can. Then why are we still here? Ethan called 3 private operators. The first had no aircraft available until morning. The second required a $200,000 deposit. The third refused the booking after learning the passengers were connected to an active ownership dispute involving collateral documents. Each rejection removed another layer from the billionaire image he had carried so easily through the cabin. Sienna sat near the window in her cream suit, her Paris gala gown hanging inside a protective bag beside her. "The press expects us tomorrow," she said. "The investors expect the announcement. We will get there." Without the jet, Ethan looked toward the dark hangar where CV-900 had disappeared behind locked doors. "Nia is trying to frighten us." Sienna's laugh was quiet and sharp. She recalled an aircraft in mid-flight, canceled the entire arrival package, and grounded every service tied to your name. "That is not fear." Ethan turned toward her. "You were the one who changed the ownership presentation. Because you told me the assets would transfer after Paris, after the agreement was signed. And you told the investors the jet was already part of Holloway Blake Heir." Their voices remained low, but the terminal staff could hear enough to understand that the glamorous couple stranded before them had arrived carrying plans built on someone else's property. While Ethan searched for another route, Nia crossed the Atlantic aboard CV-101. The cabin was larger than the one he had taken, but quieter, designed less for display than command. She sat beneath soft blue lighting with Malcolm Reed, the official Carter Aviation Registry, and the complete Paris Summit program spread across a conference table. "Ethan's office is still sending updates," Malcolm said. "They are telling organizers he was delayed by a technical issue. Do not correct them yet." The opening panel begins at 10. Nia reviewed the revised introduction prepared by the summit chair. Dr. Nia Carter Holloway, founder and controlling owner of Carter Aviation Holdings, would be welcomed before the keynote. The aircraft registry, European operating licenses, and ownership structure would be displayed publicly for the first time. "And Holloway Blake Heir?" she asked. "No valid company certification, no licensed fleet, no approved routes, and no authority to use Carter Aviation assets." "Good." She closed the file and looked through the window at the dark ocean below. Ethan had believed leaving her on the runway would establish who had been chosen and who had been discarded. Instead, every mile separating them was carrying Nia closer to the room where his deception would collapse. Back in Bangor, Sienna received a message from the Paris hotel. The presidential suite had been released, the gala vehicle canceled, and the wardrobe service suspended because all charges had been guaranteed by Carter Aviation. "She canceled everything," Sienna said. Ethan took the phone. "Book another room." "With what account?" He looked at her. "Use yours." Sienna's expression changed. "My company card was linked to the new venture." "Then use a personal one." She looked away. The partnership they had called a future now stood exposed as 2 people waiting for someone else's money to move. At 2:40 a.m., Ethan finally secured 2 commercial business class seats through Boston, arriving in Paris less than an hour before his scheduled keynote. Then his phone lit with an urgent message from the summit director. The event program had changed. Ethan's ownership announcement was removed, Sienna's title deleted, and a new opening address inserted before his name. Attached was the official speaker card bearing Nia's photograph and one line neither of them had expected to see. Sole owner of the aircraft, fleet, and European operating rights Ethan planned to claim. The jet Ethan called his had been purchased on the night Nia quietly saved his company from collapse, and he never once asked whose signature kept both of them in the air. 7 years earlier, Holloway Global was still small enough that Ethan knew every employee by name and anxious enough that he checked the company account before ordering dinner. The firm had grown quickly, but one failed acquisition left it facing nearly $80 million in debt, 3 lawsuits, and a lender prepared to seize its remaining assets. Ethan came home after midnight carrying no briefcase, only a folded newspaper with his company's name beneath the word crisis. Nia found him sitting in the dark kitchen of their Brooklyn brownstone, his tie loose and his hands motionless on the table. "It may be over," he said. She sat across from him. "How much time do you have?" "For days. And if the lender refuses an extension, we close. Everyone goes home." At that time, Nia had already built Carter Aviation into a respected charter and medical transport company, though she kept her controlling role private. Her mother's family had spent decades acquiring hangar rights, aircraft leases, and emergency logistics contracts, while larger firms dismissed them as too small. Nia inherited no effortless empire. She inherited complicated debt, aging equipment, and a promise that the company would never confuse visibility with ownership. By sunrise, she had called Carter Aviation's board and arranged a rescue package through a separate trust. The trust purchased Holloway Global's distressed transportation division, absorbed the lender's immediate risk, and guaranteed payroll long enough for Ethan to restructure. One condition required that the investment remain confidential until the company stabilized. Nia agreed. She believed protecting Ethan's dignity would help preserve their marriage. Months later, Holloway Global recovered. Ethan appeared on business television and described the turnaround as proof that disciplined leadership could defeat panic. Nia watched from their living room while he thanked investors, employees, and a few strategic partners. He never mentioned her. She told herself recognition was less important than the people who kept their jobs. The Gulfstream came later. Carter Aviation purchased it through Nia's controlling trust after winning a federal medical transport contract. The aircraft was designed to serve executives during the week and emergency missions when needed. Ethan first stepped aboard during a storm-delayed conference trip to Chicago. He walked through the cream cabin, admired the walnut paneling, and asked how much a jet like that cost. Nia smiled and said, "More than comfort should ever be worth." He assumed Carter Aviation had assigned it to him because of Holloway Global's growing influence. Over time, the assumption became a story. He told reporters, "Our jet had allowed him to build international partnerships." He hosted investors inside it, changed flight schedules, and eventually began calling the crew my aviation team. Nia never corrected him publicly. She believed access could remain generous as long as respect remained intact. Now, aboard CV-101 over the Atlantic, Malcolm Reed opened the original ownership file beside her. The purchase agreement showed Carter Aviation Holdings as sole owner of CV-900, with Nia's trust holding every controlling share. Ethan's name appeared only in an attached household use policy granting limited spousal access. "He signed this," Malcolm said. Page 12. Nia looked at Ethan's signature beneath the clause stating that privileges ended upon misuse, separation, or any unauthorized transfer attempt. "He signed without reading," she said. He read the benefits. Malcolm opened another folder recovered from the Paris presentation. It contained a financing schedule for Holloway Blake Heir. The French investor expected 3 aircraft, 2 hangars, and a 20-year operating license. Ethan had valued the assets at $400 million. He intended to sell rights he never owned, Malcolm said. Nia studied the document, then turned to the final attachment. Sienna had included an organizational chart showing Ethan as founder, herself as chief executive, and Nia listed only as a former family advisor. Beneath it was a note from Ethan. "Once the Paris announcement is public, Nia will have no practical way to reverse it without damaging both companies." Nia closed the file. "He thought public embarrassment would keep me silent." Malcolm looked toward the flight map. CAV-101 was less than 2 hours from Paris. "What do you want waiting when we land?" Nia signed the ownership disclosure and handed it back. "The truth, displayed before he reaches the stage." Then Malcolm received an encrypted alert from Bangor. Investigators had searched CV-900's onboard safe and found a sealed transfer deed assigning the jet to Holloway Blake Heir. The deed carried Nia's forged signature, dated 3 days before Ethan left her on the tarmac. The forged transfer deed proved Ethan had not simply mistaken Nia's generosity for ownership. He had prepared to turn that mistake into a legal fact before she could stop him. CAV-101 touched down at Le Bourget just after sunrise, its silver fuselage reflecting the pale Paris sky as ground crews guided it toward a private hangar reserved for summit sponsors. Nia descended the stairs in a tailored burgundy coat, followed by Malcolm Reed, Carter Aviation's general counsel, and 2 members of the European Operations Board. No photographers waited on the tarmac. She had requested privacy. The public reveal belonged inside the conference hall, where records would matter more than spectacle. In the executive lounge, Malcolm placed the recovered transfer deed on the table. Nia's signature appeared beneath language assigning CAV-900 to Holloway Blake Heir for $1 and strategic consideration. The notary seal belonged to a corporate services firm in Delaware. The witness line carried Sienna's name. Ethan had signed as receiving director. The signature was copied from a medical transport agreement, the attorney said. The digital pressure pattern is identical. Nia examined the page without touching it. Who prepared the deed? A private law office retained through Sienna's department. They were told the transfer had your verbal approval. Malcolm opened the attached correspondence. Ethan had written that his wife preferred to remain invisible and would not attend the Paris closing. Sienna added that any delay should be ignored because Mrs. Holloway is emotional about aircraft, but has no operational role. Nia read the sentence twice. It was not the insult that unsettled her. It was the precision of the plan. Ethan had left her on the tarmac because her absence was necessary. If she reached Paris beside him, investors might ask why the registered owner was not signing. By removing her from the flight, he intended to present silence as consent. They did not abandon me impulsively, she said. They needed me missing. Across the Atlantic, Ethan and Sienna waited in a Boston airport lounge after missing their first connection. Their commercial flight had been delayed, and the summit keynote was now less than 4 hours away. Ethan paced beside the windows while Sienna reviewed messages from Paris. The investor wants confirmation the deed is valid, she said. Do not answer. They already transferred the deposit into escrow. Then the deal stays alive until we arrive. Sienna looked up. Nia has the original aircraft registry. If she presents it publicly, the deed collapses. Ethan stopped pacing. She will not accuse us of fraud in front of the industry. You left her in the rain and tried to sell her jet. She protects reputations. She always has. The confidence in his voice came from 12 years of watching Nia absorb humiliation privately to protect employees, families, and institutions larger than herself. He had mistaken discipline for surrender so often that he could no longer imagine it ending. In Paris, Nia entered the summit's preparation room where the stage screens displayed the original keynote program. Ethan's name remained in large letters. Beneath it, Sienna was still listed as chief executive of Holloway Blake Heir. The summit director approached with visible concern. Dr. Carter Holloway, their office insists the ownership transfer is complete. Nia handed him the official registry, the household use agreement, and the forged deed. Display all three in that order. During Ethan's keynote? Before it, the director studied the documents, then nodded. The French investor is already here. Good. Ask him to remain. At 11, the conference hall filled with aviation executives, bankers, manufacturers, and journalists. On stage, a covered model of CV-900 waited beneath the Holloway Blake Heir logo. Nia took a seat in the front row beside Carter Aviation's board. Ethan and Sienna entered through the rear doors 12 minutes late, still carrying the fatigue of commercial travel. Sienna wore her gala suit, but the confidence she had displayed inside Nia's jet was gone. Ethan saw Nia immediately. His steps slowed. The summit director walked to the microphone. Before today's keynote, we must correct the ownership record connected to the aircraft and operating rights being presented. The first registry appeared on the screen, naming Carter Aviation Holdings as sole owner. The second displayed Nia as controlling founder. The third showed Ethan's privileges as revocable spousal guest access. A murmur moved through the hall. Then the forged deed appeared. Ethan's face went still. Sienna reached for his arm, but he pulled away. The French investor stood from the second row. Mr. Holloway, he said, did you accept our deposit using this document? Ethan looked toward Nia. We can explain this privately. Nia remained seated. You tried to make my absence part of the contract, she said. The explanation belongs in the same room where you planned to sell what was mine. Then Carter Aviation's counsel opened the final page of the investigation. The forgery had triggered an automatic protective clause in the rescue agreement Nia signed 7 years earlier. Effective immediately, every transportation asset, voting right, and international license held by Holloway Global reverted to Carter Aviation control, meaning Ethan had not only lost the jet he tried to steal. He had just lost authority over the company that depended on it. The room did not turn against Ethan when the ownership records appeared. It simply stopped believing the version of him that had required Nia to remain invisible. The conference hall held its silence while the final protective clause remained projected above the stage. Carter Aviation now controlled the transportation assets, voting rights, and international licenses Holloway Global had used to build its public image. Ethan stood near the rear aisle, his expression fixed on the screen as if the language might change if he stared long enough. Sienna remained beside him, one hand still wrapped around the folder containing her keynote notes. The covered aircraft model on stage suddenly looked less like a launch and more like evidence. "This is a contractual dispute," Ethan said at last. His voice carried without a microphone. "It does not invalidate the business strategy." Nia rose from the front row. She did not hurry toward the stage. Every step was measured, every sound clear against the polished floor. "The strategy depends on aircraft you do not own, hangars you cannot transfer, and operating rights you were never authorized to promise." The French investor, Lucien Moreau, opened the escrow agreement on his tablet. "Our deposit was issued based on 3 guarantees," he said. "Control of CAV 900, access to the Paris hangar network, and a 20-year European operating license." He looked directly at Ethan. "Do you possess any of those?" Ethan's jaw tightened. They were scheduled to transfer after the announcement. "From whom?" Nia asked. He turned toward her. "We had an understanding. You had my silence." The distinction moved through the hall like a door closing. Sienna stepped forward, trying to recover the polished tone she used with reporters. Holloway Blake Heir was designed to create value for both companies. Dr. Carter Holloway remained protected through her family trust. Malcolm Reed opened the financing schedule on the screen. The proposed structure removed Dr. Carter Holloway from governance after 12 months. A second page appeared, showing an option that would have allowed Sienna's new company to purchase Carter Aviation's European division at a fixed price far below market value. A third page granted Ethan permanent use of the flagship aircraft even after separation. Nia studied the clauses from the stage. "You were not building a partnership," she said. "You were waiting for the public announcement to make the theft look irreversible." Sienna looked toward Ethan. "You said the ownership issue was ceremonial." "You prepared the deed," he replied. "Because you told me Nia had already agreed. I told you she would not challenge us." Their voices sharpened, revealing how little trust existed beneath the plan they called a future. Lucien closed the escrow file. "The transaction is suspended immediately. The deposit will remain frozen pending review." Ethan took one step toward the aisle. "This conference has no authority over my marriage or my company." Carter Aviation's general counsel approached the microphone. "No one is reviewing your marriage. We are reviewing the attempted transfer of regulated aviation assets using a false signature." The sentence stripped away every excuse. This was no longer a private betrayal hidden inside a luxury cabin. It was an ownership violation documented before investors, operators, and legal counsel from 3 countries. Nia looked toward the stage technician. "Remove the Holloway Blake Heir presentation." The false logo disappeared. In its place appeared Carter Aviation's official crest, followed by a map of its medical routes, charter network, and European operating centers. Many in the audience had used those services for years without knowing the woman seated before them controlled the system behind them. The summit director stepped beside Nia. "Dr. Carter Holloway, would you address the ownership record?" She stood at the microphone beneath the map her husband had tried to divide. "Carter Aviation is not for sale," she said. "Its aircraft, licenses, and staff will not be used to support private arrangements disguised as corporate strategy. Every employee, client, and medical partner will remain protected while the board completes its review." Applause did not begin immediately. First came the stillness of people recalculating everything they believed about Ethan Holloway. Then one executive stood, followed by another. The room rose not for spectacle, but for clarity. Ethan watched from the aisle as the authority he once borrowed attached itself publicly to its true owner. After the session, Malcolm handed Nia a secure report recovered from Sienna's Paris files. The attempted transfer of CAV 900 was only the first step. Hidden behind it was a signed option allowing Holloway Blake Heir to take control of Carter Aviation's entire Atlantic fleet once Nia filed for divorce. Ethan had not left her on the tarmac merely to fly his mistress to Paris. He had needed her out of the way before they tried to take every jet that carried her name. The hidden option agreement revealed that Paris was never the destination. It was the doorway Ethan and Sienna planned to use to take control of every aircraft Nia had spent years building. In a private conference room above the summit floor, Nia placed the Atlantic Fleet Agreement beside the forged transfer deed. 12 aircraft were listed across the first page, including medical transport jets, long-range charters, and 2 emergency response planes stationed along the East Coast. The option allowed Holloway Blake Heir to acquire them at less than half their market value once Nia filed for divorce or was declared inactive in Carter Aviation's daily operations. Her absence from the Paris summit would have supported the second condition. Sienna had prepared a board memorandum claiming Nia had withdrawn from executive responsibilities due to personal instability. Ethan had signed beneath it as a family witness. They planned to use the separation against you, Malcolm Reed said. Nia looked at the date. The memorandum had been drafted 3 weeks before Ethan abandoned her on the tarmac. He did not decide to leave me that morning, she said. The runway was part of the paperwork. Carter Aviation's general counsel opened the remaining attachments. Ethan and Sienna had arranged for 3 friendly directors at Holloway Global to approve a fleet management partnership immediately after the Paris announcement. Once the agreement became public, lenders would treat the aircraft as Holloway Blake Heir assets. Reversing the transaction would take months of litigation, during which medical contracts and international licenses could be suspended. They had counted on Nia protecting the company by accepting a private settlement instead of exposing the fraud. They believed your responsibility would make you surrender, Malcolm said. They believed I would protect everyone except myself. Through the glass wall, Nia could see Ethan speaking urgently with Lucien Moreau and 2 lawyers near the conference hall entrance. Sienna stood several feet away, scrolling through her phone as messages arrived from investors, journalists, and directors who had just watched her new company disappear from the stage. Ethan noticed Nia and entered the room without waiting to be invited. We need to stop escalating this, he said. Nia turned the fleet option toward him. You plan to take 12 aircraft after filing for divorce. His face remained composed, but his eyes moved quickly across the page. That agreement was preliminary. You signed it. As part of a restructuring proposal. You described me as inactive. Ethan lowered his voice. You were rarely involved publicly. Publicly? Nia let the words stand between them. You knew I controlled the fleet. I knew Carter Aviation was part of your family structure. You knew enough to forge my signature. He looked toward the council. I did not forge anything. You accepted a transfer deed carrying a false signature and represented it as valid collateral. Ethan's jaw tightened. Sienna handled the legal documents. Sienna entered behind him. Do not place this entirely on me. You witnessed the deed, he said, because you promised Nia had approved it. I told you the transfer would proceed. That is not the same thing. Nia watched them divide responsibility with the same precision they had once divided her assets. Neither spoke of love. Neither defended the other. Their relationship had been built around access, and now that access was gone, all that remained was blame. Malcolm placed a suspension notice before Ethan. Under the rescue agreement, his voting authority over every transportation subsidiary was revoked pending investigation. A second notice terminated Sienna's authority to represent Carter Aviation, Holloway Global, or the non-existent Holloway Blake Heir. You cannot remove me from my own company, Ethan said. Carter Aviation now controls the relevant voting rights, Malcolm replied. Your authority depended on compliance with the agreement you violated. Sienna looked at Nia. What do you want? Nia closed the fleet option. I want every aircraft protected, every employee informed, and every false document withdrawn. And after that, neither of you will use my silence as a business strategy again. Ethan stepped closer. If you expose all of this, Holloway Global could collapse. Then, it will be stabilized without you. She signed the emergency board resolution. Within minutes, Carter Aviation froze all fleet transfers, canceled the Paris collateral agreement, and notified regulators that CV 900 remained under its sole ownership. Then Malcolm received one final message from New York. Investigators had found that Ethan's team had already scheduled Nia's removal from the Carter Aviation Board for Monday morning, using the same false claim of inactivity. The vote had been arranged before she was left on the tarmac, proving the abandoned wife was not an inconvenience to their trip. She was the final owner they intended to erase. The board meeting Ethan arranged to remove Nia began without him, because by the time New York woke, every director had already received proof that the woman they planned to dismiss owned the company beneath their votes. Nia remained in Paris while Malcolm Reed connected her to Carter Aviation's emergency session through a secure video wall inside the summit's private offices. In New York, 9 directors gathered around a glass conference table overlooking the hangars at Westchester County Airport. 3 of them had been invited by Ethan's legal team to support the motion declaring Nia inactive. The remaining 6 had received the forged memorandum, the fleet option, the false transfer deed, and the recording of Ethan ordering the aircraft door closed while its registered owner stood on the tarmac. No one spoke casually. Outside the windows, Carter Aviation jets moved across the morning runway in silver lines, each one representing contracts, employees, and responsibilities Ethan had treated as pieces in a private negotiation. The board chair, Elaine Porter, opened the session. The motion before us was submitted by Holloway Global and requests the removal of Dr. Nia Carter Holloway for prolonged executive inactivity. She looked toward the empty chair reserved for Ethan. Before considering it, the board will review who submitted the supporting evidence. Malcolm displayed the metadata. The medical leave statement had been created on Sienna Blake's laptop. Ethan's office had added his signature. A physician's letter, claiming Nia was emotionally unfit, had been fabricated from an old travel clearance. The airline records showed Nia had conducted 43 board approvals, 12 fleet acquisitions, and 6 emergency contract reviews during the period they described as inactivity. One director who had agreed to support Ethan removed his glasses. We were told Dr. Carter had withdrawn from operations. Nia's face appeared on the wall. She wore the same burgundy coat from the summit, her expression composed beneath the pale Paris light. I withdrew from publicity, she said. Not ownership, not leadership, and never responsibility. Ethan entered the New York conference room 12 minutes late through a private video connection from Paris. Sienna stood behind him, no longer listed as a corporate representative, but still carrying the posture of someone expecting influence to return if she waited long enough. This proceeding is invalid, Ethan said. The board cannot reverse a governance proposal without Holloway Global's participation. Elaine opened the rescue agreement. Holloway Global's voting rights over Carter Aviation reverted after the unauthorized transfer attempt. Your participation is permitted as testimony, not authority. Ethan looked toward Nia's image. You engineered this to take control. I already had control, she replied. You engineered paperwork to make everyone forget it. The board reviewed the household use agreement next. Ethan's access to CAV 900 was displayed plainly. Revocable spousal privilege, no ownership rights, no transfer authority, no power to remove the registered owner from any flight. Sienna's name appeared nowhere. You used a guest privilege to deny boarding to the owner, Elaine said, then attempted to pledge the aircraft as collateral. Ethan's voice tightened. The deal would have strengthened both companies. By removing Dr. Carter from both, he did not answer. The vote proceeded at 9:42 a.m. The motion to remove Nia failed unanimously. A second resolution suspended Ethan from all Carter Aviation partnerships, canceled every aircraft privilege attached to the marriage, and barred Sienna from representing any affiliated aviation entity. It passed 9-0. The third resolution placed Holloway Global's transportation division under temporary Carter Aviation stewardship to protect employees, licenses, and medical routes. Ethan stared at the result. You cannot run my company without me. Nia looked through the glass wall behind her at the Paris summit floor, where her name now appeared above Carter Aviation's official crest. I am not running your image, she said. I am protecting the people beneath it. After the meeting, Elaine sent Nia the final forensic report. The false board removal was connected to a private separation agreement Ethan planned to deliver after Paris. It offered Nia a modest settlement in exchange for surrendering all claims to the fleet, the jet, and Carter Aviation's European rights. Attached was a handwritten note from Sienna. Once she signs, the runway story becomes simple. Ethan left because the company was always his. Nia closed the file and looked toward CV 101 waiting beyond the hangar doors. They had tried to turn abandonment into evidence of ownership. Instead, every document now proved that the wife left behind controlled the aircraft, the fleet, and the future they planned to take. The final ownership hearing did not ask whether Ethan had betrayed his wife. It asked whether a man who forged access to her fleet could be trusted near any company carrying her name. By late afternoon, The Paris summit's largest conference room had been converted into an emergency review chamber. Carter Aviation's European board sat along one side of the polished table, while regulators, lenders, and legal representatives from Holloway Global joined through secure screens. Nia took the central seat beneath a wall of windows overlooking Le Bourget, where CV-101 waited in the pale evening light. Ethan sat across from her with two attorneys. Sienna occupied a chair near the door, separated from both companies and permitted to remain only because her signature appeared on the forged transfer deed. The first hour passed without raised voices. Documents spoke more clearly than anger. Malcolm Reed presented the aircraft registry, the false board removal motion, and the Atlantic Fleet option scheduled to activate after Nia filed for divorce. He played Ethan's recorded instruction declaring that Nia no longer belonged on the trip or in his personal decisions. Then he displayed the communication trail showing that Sienna removed Nia from the manifest and assigned herself the owner's seat before the aircraft departed New York. Mr. Holloway, the board chair said, "Did you know CV-900 belonged to Carter Aviation Holdings?" Ethan looked toward the screen. "I knew it was held within Nia's family structure." "Did you own any portion of the aircraft?" "Not directly." "Did you have authority to transfer it?" His pause lasted only a second, but everyone heard it. "I believed marital access created shared authority." Nia's expression did not change. The board chair opened the household use agreement bearing Ethan's signature. "This document states the opposite." Sienna shifted in her chair. "Ethan told me the transfer had been approved." Carter Aviation's counsel turned toward her. "You witnessed a deed carrying Dr. Carter Holloway's signature. I believed it was authentic. You copied that signature from an earlier medical contract." Sienna's face tightened. "My staff prepared the file. The metadata identifies your laptop." The room settled into silence. Ethan looked at Sienna, but there was no tenderness left between them, only the fear that one person's admission might become the other's defense. "She managed the documents," he said. Sienna turned sharply. "You needed Nia absent from Paris. You said once the announcement was public, she would protect the company instead of exposing us." Ethan lowered his voice. "You proposed the fleet option because you wanted control after the divorce." Their accusations unfolded exactly as Nia expected. Neither had stolen for love. They had used desire to make ambition feel personal, then used ambition to excuse betrayal. The board chair called for the first vote. Ethan was permanently removed from every Carter Aviation advisory, travel, and partnership role. His spousal privileges were canceled without possibility of reinstatement. The decision passed unanimously. The second vote prohibited Sienna from representing, contracting with, or claiming affiliation to Carter Aviation or any of its subsidiaries. It also required the immediate withdrawal of Holloway Blake Heirs filings in the United States and Europe. That resolution passed without opposition. Ethan leaned forward. "What happens to Holloway Global?" Nia answered before the chair could. "Its transportation division remains under stewardship. Employees keep their jobs. Medical contracts continue. Independent directors will decide which parts of the company deserve to survive. And my position? Suspended pending the financial review." Sienna looked at Ethan. "You said she could never remove you." Nia turned toward her. "I did not remove him because of you. I removed his access because he tried to sell assets he never owned." Malcolm then placed a sealed notice before Sienna. Carter Aviation had discovered that the Paris investor deposit was routed through a company registered solely in her name. If the fraudulent transfer had closed, she would have received a 10% personal commission worth $40 million. Ethan read the figure twice. "You were being paid separately?" Sienna said nothing. The last illusion between them disappeared. Before the hearing ended, Nia signed a permanent fleet protection amendment requiring dual board approval for every future aircraft transfer. Then Malcolm handed her the final registry update. CAV-900, the jet Ethan used to abandon her, had been reclassified from executive privilege to owner-controlled humanitarian service. Its first scheduled mission would transport children requiring specialized treatment from New York to Paris, and Ethan's name had been removed from every access list attached to the aircraft. The jet Ethan once used as proof of his power returned to New York carrying children whose families would never know it had almost been stolen for a mistress's private fortune. 3 weeks after the Paris hearing, CV-900 descended through a clear autumn sky toward Westchester County Airport, its gold stripe bright beneath the morning sun. The cabin no longer held champagne glasses, investor folders, or pillows embroidered for private vanity. Two medical teams sat beside three children traveling for specialized treatment, while their parents rested beneath soft blankets provided by Carter Aviation. A pediatric nurse occupied the same cream leather seat Sienna had claimed as her own. The silver initials NCH had been removed from the headrest at Nia's request and replaced with a simple blue emblem representing the Carter Medical Air Bridge. Ownership no longer needed to be stitched into the furniture. It existed in the mission. Nia waited inside the hangar wearing a dark green coat and low heels, standing beside Malcolm Reed, Elaine Porter, and several employees who had worked through the investigation without missing a single medical departure. When the aircraft door opened, the first child appeared holding a small model airplane given to him by Captain Daniel Mercer. Nia smiled and stepped back so the family could walk forward without cameras or applause. The moment belonged to them. Across town, Ethan sat inside a temporary office while the independent board completed its review of Holloway Global. His name remained on the building, but his access card opened only 2 floors. Every aviation contract had been transferred into Carter stewardship. His executive travel privileges were gone, and the company car he once used without thought had been returned. His attorneys advised him to accept a negotiated resignation before the board voted publicly. He signed the letter without calling Nia. The man who once ordered a jet door closed in her face now understood that no title could reopen what he had forfeited. Sienna's position ended more abruptly. The Paris investor canceled the transaction, froze the private commission, and demanded repayment of legal fees tied to the forged transfer. Holloway Blake Air was dissolved before operating a single flight. Her name disappeared from summit materials, corporate filings, and press releases she had written to announce herself as chief executive. She sent Nia one email claiming Ethan had misled her about ownership. Nia forwarded it to counsel without replying. Deception did not erase participation. At Carter Aviation headquarters, the board approved a permanent restructuring plan. The Atlantic fleet would remain protected by an independent trust. No spouse, executive, or individual director could transfer an aircraft without public board review and verified owner consent. A new employee council received seats in all major asset decisions, ensuring the people who maintained, flew, and scheduled the aircraft could never again be treated as invisible machinery beneath someone else's ambition. Nia signed the final amendment at the same conference table where Ethan had once planned to remove her for inactivity. This time, mechanics, pilots, medical coordinators, and dispatchers stood around her. The company was never meant to be a symbol of luxury, she said. It was meant to move people safely when distance stood between them and what they needed. After the meeting, Malcolm handed her the completed divorce agreement. Ethan had surrendered every claim to Carter Aviation, the fleet, the European licenses, and CV-900. In exchange, Nia made no public statement about the affair beyond what the ownership investigation required. She did not need his humiliation. She needed the record corrected. That evening, Ethan asked to meet her one final time at the airport. Nia agreed to speak inside the empty observation lounge overlooking the runway. He arrived alone, carrying no attorney and no expectation of forgiveness. "I thought leaving you there would make the choice clear," he said. Nia watched a medical jet taxi toward the lights. "It did." He looked at her. "I chose Sienna." "No," Nia replied. "You chose the belief that everything near you belonged to you." His gaze dropped. "I did not know the jet was yours. You knew I was your wife." The answer left him silent. Outside, CV-900 began its first night departure under the medical program. Ethan watched the aircraft move beyond the glass, carrying no trace of his name or authority. Before Nia walked away, Malcolm sent her the final registry confirmation. Every aircraft Ethan and Sienna had attempted to claim was now permanently locked inside the Carter Trust. The jet he used to abandon her had become the first one legally protected from ever being used against its owner again. The day Ethan left Nia standing in the rain, he believed he was flying toward a better life. He never realized he had already walked away from the only future he did not have to steal. 1 year after the Paris summit, Carter Aviation held the first anniversary of its medical airbridge program inside the restored Westchester hangar. There were no velvet ropes, no champagne towers, and no photographers waiting for celebrities. Folding chairs filled the polished concrete floor beneath the wings of City 900, now marked with a blue medical emblem and the words Carter Air Bridge along its silver fuselage. Families who had traveled for treatment sat beside pilots, mechanics, dispatchers, nurses, and employees who once watched Ethan call the aircraft his own. Nia stood near the open cabin door in a cream suit, listening as a mother from Detroit described how the jet had carried her daughter to Paris for surgery when commercial travel was impossible. The woman's voice trembled with gratitude. Nia lowered her eyes, not because she was uncomfortable with praise, but because she remembered the same doorway closing in front of her while rain struck the tarmac. The aircraft had not changed. Its purpose had. Since the restructuring, Carter Aviation had completed more than 200 medical missions, expanded emergency routes across the Atlantic, and created a permanent travel fund for women and children facing urgent relocation after financial abuse. The Employee Council now reviewed every major asset decision. No private relationship could again become a hidden pathway into the fleet. Holloway Global survived under independent leadership, though the company no longer occupied the headlines Ethan once chased. He resigned fully after the audit confirmed that he had approved false documents, misrepresented ownership, and used corporate resources to support the affair. His fortune narrowed to the assets that remained legally his. He moved out of the Manhattan penthouse, left the executive circuit, and began advising a regional investment firm in Connecticut. Sienna disappeared from the aviation industry after the French investor recovered its legal costs, and regulators barred her from filing new aviation ventures for several years. The $40 million commission she expected never reached her account. The black and gold brochures announcing Holloway Blake Air became exhibits in the ownership case, proof that a company could look real long before it legally existed. Nia did not follow either of their lives. Freedom, she learned, was not knowing what happened to the people who betrayed her. It was no longer needing the answer. After the anniversary ceremony, she walked alone through CV 900. The cream leather seats remained, but the owner's monogram was gone. Medical storage occupied the cabinet where Ethan kept expensive liquor. The onboard safe that once held the forged transfer deed now contained passports, emergency documents, and sealed medication for families in transit. Captain Daniel Mercer stood near the cockpit. "We depart for New Orleans in 40 minutes, he said. "A mother and 2 children are connecting to a treatment center in Houston." Nia nodded. "Make sure they have the rear suite already prepared." As she stepped back onto the hangar floor, Malcolm Reed approached with the final divorce decree and aircraft registry update. Every claim Ethan had made against Carter Aviation had been dismissed. Every jet, hangar right, and European license remained permanently inside Nia's controlling trust. The legal record now stated what the runway had revealed before anyone else understood it. Ethan Holloway had been a guest aboard his wife's aircraft, never its owner. Outside the hangar, Ethan waited beside the observation fence. Nia had not invited him, but she agreed to speak when he asked for one final minute. He looked toward CAV 900 as a medical crew loaded equipment. "I heard what you turned it into," he said. "It was always meant to serve a purpose larger than us. I thought it proved I had made it." Nia looked at him calmly. "You thought being allowed inside something meant you created it." He lowered his gaze. "I left you there because I wanted you to feel powerless." The honesty arrived too late to wound her. "And did I?" he asked. Nia watched the aircraft door remain open for the family, approaching across the tarmac. "No," she said. "You did not leave me on the tarmac. You only stepped off the life I owned." Then she turned toward the hangar as City 900 prepared to fly, carrying no mistress, no false founder, and no borrowed authority into the sky.